We will go ahead and get started because I want to be mindful of your all's time. So my name is Carrie Lichty, and I am the Assistant Director of Marketing Communications here at the Louisville Institute. Love what I get to do, and this is one of my favorite programs. So welcome today. We are just going to give a fairly quick overview of the Pastoral Study Project Grant. I posted the link in the chat, which is actually on our website. So just to give you an idea of how this is going to go, this is going to be a really general overview. This is not necessarily the place to ask very specific questions about your actual project. We'll give you other options for that. So think of this as an overview. There is a Q&A section at the very bottom. If you think of questions throughout this next 25 minutes or so, drop them in the Q&A. I'll be posting some links in the chat itself, but put your questions in the Q&A. We'll save time at the very end. Chances are we'll answer most of those questions, but if we don't get to them, we'll make sure that we get to them at the very end. So I'll be dropping the helpful chats. I am going to pass it over to, this is Amy Moiso, who is our Associate Director, and she is over the project grant for research, or the Pastoral Study Project grants, and we'll be glad to help you with all the questions. So if you have any questions, let us know, but please drop your questions in the Q&A.
Thanks, Carrie. We're so glad to have so many of you here. This is the first year that we've been doing webinars this way. And just so you know, this is being recorded so that we can post it later. So if there's something that you miss as we go through this, you can come back and watch it again later. And we'll be sending that link out to everybody who's here and people who weren't able to be here but signed up. And it will also eventually be on our website. So know that this is available to you after the fact. As Carrie said, my name is Amy Moiso. I'm the Associate Director here at the Louisville Institute. And we're thrilled to be able to share the Pastoral Study Project grant with you and hopefully help to answer any questions that you might have about the application process. So let me start quickly with just a little bit about the Louisville Institute in case you're not familiar with us. Our mission is pretty simple. It's to bridge the church and academy through awarding grants and fellowships to those who lead and study North American religious institutions, practices, and movements, and thereby promoting scholarship that strengthens the church, academy, and society, and ultimately contributes to the flourishing of the church. So the very simple version of that is we give out money to help people learn more and do more research about what it means to be Christian in the North American context, and to really be able to dig deeply into deep questions about what it means to be a Christian in this time, what the church is about, what the flourishing of the church looks like. So we get to do that through several different grant and fellowship programs. We have 6 grants and fellowships. The Pastoral Study Project grant is what we're talking about today. We also have a grant for researchers that's primarily for academics, a first book grant for scholars of color, which is for scholars of color who are in the academy trying to get tenure and need to publish a book. Doctoral fellowship, dissertation fellowship, and postdoctoral fellowships are fellowships for PhD students in religion who are thinking about going into theological education. So today we're going to talk about the Pastoral Study Project grant. So I want to encourage you as we start, if you haven't had a chance to go to our website and look at this yet, we have an application guide. It's on the page that Carrie has already linked in the chat. If you go to that page, you can click on the guide and pull it up. If you feel like you want to do that right now, that will help you as you go through this, because everything I'm going to say is in the guide. And as we go, I'm also going to be able to show you where in the guide we are. So if you happen to have that guide in front of you or you want to pull it up, again, it's on our website. It's a PDF that you just download. Again, if you don't have it in front of you, you can pull it up later. Everything that's going to be in this webinar will be in that guide. So this is what the front page looks like. That's why it says guide page 1. These little orange circles are going to appear on each of the pages where I'm referencing something specific in the guide, so you can find it either now or in the future. So what is a pastoral study grant? So I'm looking at page 2 in the guide, if you're looking at the guide. Pastoral Study Project grants are grants of up to $20,000 US. And they're for pastoral leaders in the United States and Canada. I'm going to say a little bit more in a minute about what we mean by pastoral leaders. The grants that we offer provide time and resources to think, research, ask, learn, study, and reflect on an important question or idea. So if you yourself are a pastor or working in a church setting or working for a denomination or some other place where you are a full-time pastoral leader and you have this idea, this question that's just been nagging you, and you really wish you just had time and space to study it, that's what our grants are for. So it can be a question about ministry, the church, Christian faith in our communities and world, issues that the church is involved in, questions that are confronting the church right now. All those are the kinds of things that we fund with our grants. Two little quick notes on that. These are study grants. So unlike a sabbatical grant where you might be taking time for rest and renewal, the purpose of these grants is for you to have a chance to study and research and engage these difficult questions or these exciting questions or these questions that you're passionate about. So if you're looking for the kind of a grant that's going to give you time off from your work to go on vacation or to go do some kind of pilgrimage or something like that, that's more of a spiritual reflection time, those are a different grant. They are available through Lilly. There's a couple different options for that. If you read the application guide, we have some directions where you might go if that's the kind of grant you're looking for. These are study and research grants. Secondly, while most people participate in our grants while they're still working, so they might take off some time, like one day a month or a couple of weeks, or even 2 or 3 months if they can do that. This is not something that we expect you to do as part of your regular work. So part of what we hope this money can help you do is have some time. So that might mean that you're going to have pulpit supply so that you don't have to preach for several weeks so that you can work on this. It might mean that you're going to take time away. It might mean that you take a day a month. And so some of what this grant provides is to give you some time. So do not be thinking that as you're working on a grant, you're also going to be doing your full-time work. We encourage you to take some time away to do this research and study. So who's eligible for a PSP grant? This is a question we get really often. I'm looking at the guide on page 3 and 4. So we intentionally use the words pastoral leaders so that we can include people who've been trained for ordained ministry, the people who we normally think of as clergy or priests or ministers, but also those who are serving as Christian leaders in a lot of different kinds of capacities. So you might be part of a tradition that does mentoring into ministry as opposed to theological training specifically into ministry. Or you might have had theological education in your past, but you're working now at a nonprofit or some other kind of institution. So we understand pastoral leaders quite broadly. So in the past, this has included clergy, chaplains, church and denominational staff, members of religious orders or monastic communities, nonprofit and parachurch staff. So maybe you're working at some organization that's affiliated with a church, but it's not a church itself. Artists and musicians who work in church settings, independent researchers and writers who are connected to the church, pastoral counselors, ordained ministers who are not currently employed in religious settings, like somebody who might be retired, or maybe they had been working in a church and now they're doing something else, and others regularly working in recognized positions of pastoral leadership. This may include you, or you may have questions about whether you're included in this group. If you have questions at any time, please email us at grants@louisville-institute.org. You can ask any questions about our grants@louisville-institute.org. Carrie will put that in the chat at some point too, if she hasn't already. But one of the eligibility questions that we get often is what counts as a pastoral leader. We're pretty broad in that. So if you have any further questions, please go ahead and just ask. How can you use your grant funds if you have a PSP grant? So this is on the page 5 of the guide. The grant fund should be used to make your research project possible. So you can use funds in ways that make it possible for you to do this research. So first of all, time off. We talked about that a little bit already. Maybe you're going to take some time off and you need to supplement your salary because you're going to take it as unpaid time. Maybe you're going to do pulpit supply. If you're a pastor in a church, you need someone to come in and do pulpit supply for several weeks. This is a very common use of grant funds. Another common use is resources and tools. So maybe you need some books to read. Maybe you need to attend some consultations. Maybe you're going to do interviews and you want to record those interviews and transcribe them. Those things cost money. So those are the kinds of things you can use your grant funds for. We do allow grant funds to be used for travel, specifically travel that's specific to your research project, right? So again, how does the funding make your research project possible? So maybe you're doing some comparison between how different churches are doing something, and you want to visit those partner churches. That would be an appropriate use of travel funds. Maybe you need to go to some places that have a library that has the materials that you need, and you want to go there. Maybe you're going to go do interviews with people in different parts of the country. Those are the kinds of things that travel can be used for. If you are caring for children or for other family members and you need some help with that in order to get your research to happen, childcare and family support is a really common thing that people need to be taken care of in order to do this kind of work. So that's an appropriate use of grant funds. And finally, compensation for participants and others involved. Maybe you're going to have a survey and you want to give gift cards to the people who participate in the survey. Maybe you're going to be engaged in a particular community and you want to compensate the people who you're interviewing or the church that you're engaged with for their participation. That's another place where you can use grant funds. That's a pretty common option. There are other things that aren't listed here, but these are some of the primary categories. There are some things that you can't use grant funds for that we want to highlight too. You can't use it to pay yourself your regular salary to do your current job. You are paid for that already. If you take unpaid time off, if you're working only part-time and you'd like to use some money to supplement your part-time income, those things are okay, but we're not going to pay you to do the job you already have. We can't use your grants for new programs or staff at your church. So if you want to start a new program at your church, you can research that new program with our money, but you can't pay for it with the money. Does that make sense? You can't hire a new staff person to do the research for you who's going to continue on at your church. That's not what this grant is for. This grant is for you to do that research, for you to get a chance to engage in these questions, not for us to fund programs at your church. Likewise, we want you to do the research. So we can't pay an expert to do that research for you and have you just get the information back. The idea here is that we believe you have wisdom that's important. You have this wealth of knowledge about what it means to be a pastoral leader. And we want to know what you think about it and to have you engage in that thought process. So we're not going to have you take the money and just pay someone else to do it. We don't fund expenses toward degrees with our grants. So if you're in an MDiv program, a DMin program, even a PhD program, can't use the grant funds toward that. If you're working on a DMin dissertation and you want to do research for your dissertation, that's not what this is for. This is a separate kind of research project, not connected to a degree. So sorry, this is not a scholarship program, can't use it for that. And finally, like your regular salary, we can't let you use the grant funds for your everyday work. Can't buy a new office chair, can't buy a new desktop computer, can't pay for your cell phone, the things that you already have going, the things that you already use every day. Sorry, we can't use the grant funds for that. This is meant to be something extra, something new, something outside of the norm of your everyday work. So we're not going to let you use grant funds for that everyday work stuff. We want this to be something else. All right, so quickly, here's a little timeline of what the PSP grant looks like. So very important, application date is August 1st. The timestamp on the application is 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. You will see when you go into the online application portal, it's everywhere. This information is everywhere. And when you submit everything online, it automatically stamps that time. If for some reason you have a last minute technical glitch and it doesn't get in right at 11:59 because of technical issues, we can work around that. But otherwise, we don't accept late applications. So you need to know that August 1st deadline. Awards will be announced in November, and I'll talk a little bit more about the selection committee process in a second. Your time frame for your projects is going to be January 1 of 2025 to June 30th, 2026. So anytime in those 18 months, you can have your project. You can do 1 month, you can do 3 months, you can have it spread out over that whole time. That timeline is up to you, but it needs to be completed within those 18 months. And finally, the PSP consultation, which is a gathering in Louisville that I'll say a little bit more about in a second, is February 3rd through 5th, 2025. That is a required element of getting a grant. So check your calendars now. If you're going to already be in Tahiti February 3rd through 5th, then this is not the year for you to apply for a PSP grant because we need you to come to the consultation. So what is the consultation? So again, I'm back to the guide on page 8. At the beginning of the grant, all the grantees come together to Louisville for consultation, where they get to share their projects together, talk about what they're doing, figure out some of the nitty-gritty details of it, imagine new possibilities, get some resources about how to do different kinds of research. We pay for the whole thing. All your travel, lodging, all your other expenses are paid by us, but it's required that you attend. So February 3rd through 5th, right here in Louisville, we'll have a great time inviting you and participating with you here and hearing about your projects in person. So make sure you have that on your calendar if you apply for a grant this year. So how do you apply for a PSP grant? Here we go. First of all, I'm on the guide for the actual application is most of that document, that PDF, pages 6 through 17. So everything I'm going to reference now is somewhere in those pages. First of all, download that guide. We're going to hammer this over and over because all the details you need to know are in the application guide. Read it through carefully, know what you need to prepare. The second thing is to talk to your staff or organization about your interest in applying so that you can talk already about how this might work, right? So if you're looking at something that's next March, you want to do something next March and April, say, what does that mean for your pastoral colleagues at your church or your organization if you're going to be away some of that time? How are you talking to folks about what it looks like to organize this project within the context of your organization, or if you're going to be away to cover for you while you're gone? It's just good to have that conversation early. You're going to create an online profile in our application portal. It's really simple. You just go to the website and you click create an online profile, and it opens up in the application portal, and you type in your name and everything else. Everything will be submitted online for our applications. Again, all application materials need to be submitted by 11:59 p.m. on August 1st. There's one exception to that, which is about the letters of recommendation, which I'm going to say in a minute, but everything that you're going to prepare needs to be ready by August 1st. Again, if you have questions along the way, if you have troubles with the website, grants@louisville-institute.org. This goes to an actual person who actually reads all the questions and will send you responses. So, what's in the application? Here's a quick overview. This is page 12 through 17 of the guide. First of all, we need you to articulate what your core question is. What is the thing you want to know? What is the question that's been niggling at you that you want to respond to? And why is it important? It's really a sort of basic starting point. And crafting that question is critical to knowing what it is you want to do with your project, and for our selection committee to understand why they might want to fund your project. So you're going to have that core question, and then you're going to write an essay that describes the overall project. It's going to include your core question, the importance of the project, how you're going to carry it out, what are your methods, what are your ways of doing it, who's going to be involved, what's the timeline, when are you going to do it, how are you going to make it happen, and what do you hope the impact or outcome of the project will be. That's about 1,500 words or 5 to 7 pages. We're going to ask you for a bibliography or a list of the resources that are sort of central to your project. If you're not familiar with what a bibliography looks like, we're trying to get at what are the basic places that you're starting from, right? What are the books that you've read? What are the documentaries you've watched? What are the podcasts you've listened to that have helped you think through this question that you have? And you're going to put them in a bibliography. I'm going to say more about this in a minute, but you need a budget plan. This is a big part of the grant, right? We're going to give you money. We want to know how you're going to spend it. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. Your CV or resume would be part of the application elements, maximum of 4 pages. We usually say that for academics who have CVs that are like 47 pages. Most pastoral leaders do not have quite that long of a resume or a CV, so, but we have to put a maximum on it. So please limit to 4 pages for the CV. We're going to ask you for a little overview of your ministry context. What's your church like? Where is it located? How long have you been there? What's your ministry? What are you part of? What's the organization you work for? Just a little snippet so we get a sense of your context. We're going to ask for 2 letters of recommendation from colleagues who can attest to your work and why you'd be good to carry out this project. Those are due August 8th. So what happens is when you submit your application, you put in the names and the email addresses of those recommenders, and we send them directly an email to submit a letter of recommendation. That's why it's due later than the original due date of August 1, because those tend to come in with the original application. And then we give you another week for the recommenders to get their letters in. And then finally, there's a little form to fill out from your ministry that affirms that they know that you want to do this, that they know that you're engaged in this possibility and that you're going to apply for it. That's also due August 8th. Again, you just put in the information about the person and they will fill out the form. If you're independent or retired or otherwise are not part of a particular ministry right now, there's a way for you to fill that out with your information. All that is explained in the application guide. So don't be afraid if you don't have a ministry to do this support. We just want to know that somebody where you're working is aware of what you want to do and is affirming that they think you should go ahead and do this project. All right. What's the selection process? This is on page 7. It's very simple. We at the Louisville Institute appoint a selection committee for each of our grants and fellowships. Usually the selection committee is made up of people who've had grants before or people who otherwise are connected to the Louisville Institute world so that they kind of know what we're looking for. They meet about 8 to 10 weeks after the application due date and talk about all the different applications. For this grant, we usually receive about 100 applications and we will award 25 grants in 2025. And awards will be announced in November of this year. So you apply in August, awards are announced in November. And if you don't get a grant, you will also be told that information at the same time. What makes for a strong application? This is in the guide on page 6. It's really helpful that you formulate that core question and its importance for us. What is it you want to ask and why? And why is it important? And why is it important to the church? Make sure that you've thought through a research plan. You don't have to have everything totally perfect in a research plan, but we need to know that you've thought like, I really want to do interviews, or I really want to do a survey, or I'm going to read these books so that we can see sort of what your trajectory is. We need to know what the budget is that you're going to do and why it makes sense for what you're proposing. We need to know how you're going to use the money that we're going to give you. We want to see passion and excitement, and we want to see that together with thoughtful planning. So if you just have thoughtful planning, but we can't see why you're excited and passionate about it, it's going to be less good. If you only have passion and excitement, but we can't see a plan, that's not going to work either. So really those two things together. We'd really like to know what you hope the outcome or impact would be. Do you want to write a book? Do you want to do a podcast? Do you want to teach an adult ed class? Do you want to impact your organization? What's the impact that you hope your project will have? Make sure you do all the applications of the element and that you do them well. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're not counting your typos, but make sure that you have, like if it says put page numbers, please put page numbers. If it says put your name on every page, put your name on every page. Just basic things like that make a big difference as we're going through 100 applications. And likewise, follow the directions. If you have questions, again, you could ask us anytime, but we really need you to follow the directions so that we're comparing like applications, right? So that all the applications have the same pieces. All right, quickly about budgets. All your budget proposals have 2 parts. The guide to the budgets is pages 18 to 24 in the guide. So all of this is covered in much greater detail in the guide itself. Budget proposals have 2 parts. It's pretty simple. One is a line item budget. That's where you have a list of categories of expenses and a dollar figure for each category, sort of like an Excel spreadsheet. Budget narrative is you telling us what each of those line items is about. It's just like a sentence that describes what that category is and how you got to that number and why is it important? Why is it necessary for the project? Let me give you some examples. So on line item budget, this is pages 22 to 23. It's going to look like this, right? Basic Excel spreadsheet. If you're doing your project over 2 years, you're going to make 2 columns, one for each year, and do a total on the other side, right? So you're going to do salary replacement. You're going to take 3 months off. It's going to be $2,700 per month. Here's the columns that indicate how much that is. You have research costs, books, telephone, travel, whatever, and you're going to list those, put the dollar figures, and then a total. And again, if you're applying in Canada, you can write this all in Canadian dollars, but then do a conversion for us at the end to show us how it's under $20,000 US. The budget narrative, following the line item budget, this is on page 24. For each item of the line item budget, you're just going to list the budget item, how it helps accomplish the project, and how you calculated that amount. So here's some examples really quickly. Pulpit supply, $1,200. In order to complete my project, I'm going to need to be gone from my church for 4 Sundays, and we pay $300 a Sunday for guest preachers. Done. That's the narrative budget. Another example, participant compensation. I'm going to conduct 5 one-hour-long interviews. I'm going to give a $50 gift certificate to each participant. That's $250 for participant compensation. So again, line item budget, budget narrative. Those are the 2 pieces. This is explained in detail in the application guide. Quick other things to know before we wrap up. You can ask for feedback. What you can ask for feedback on specifically is your project idea. Unfortunately, we cannot review all the applications of people who want feedback. We can give you some insights on your actual idea for your proposal. So this is in the guide on page 9. We have an online form for you to get feedback. You're going to be asked these 3 things. What is that question you want to explore? Why is it important to you, your community, or the church in North America? And how are you planning to carry out your study? These are just snapshots, right? You don't have to have the entire thing explained. There's word limits here, but just give us an idea what you're thinking about, and we can give you some feedback about whether that makes sense for the kinds of grants we offer. Can you apply with a team of people? The answer is yes. You can apply with up to 3 people. This is described on pages 7 and 11. Everybody who's a team member has to have a significant and necessary role. So we're not talking about people who are your consultants, your advisors, the people you're going to interview. Those are not team members. Team members are people who are working together on the grant. Team members need to be included in the original application. You can't add them later. The total grant requested is limited to $20,000, no matter how many team members you have. All this is explained in the grant guide. So go there for if you have other questions. And finally, just some tips and advice. Start now. Make sure you know ahead of time what you need to prepare. You're already doing that because you're here on this webinar right now. But just know we don't accept applications after the due date. So if you miss the August 1st due date, you're going to have to wait till next year to apply. Look through the previous grantees on our website to see the kind of projects we funded before. It's not that we won't fund another project on that same topic. Maybe you're going to build on something that's been done before, but it gives you an idea of the kinds of things that we've supported. Ask questions and seek feedback from us as soon as possible. Feedback can take a while because we get so many and we answer it in the order it's received. So make sure to get your questions in early. Oops. Share the application with colleagues to get their input. They might have ideas for you. And again, talk to your staff or organization about your plans. And don't forget to tell your recommenders you're going to use them as a recommender, and let them know ahead of time so that they're prepared when they receive that email to turn in a recommendation letter. And again, follow the instructions. What else? Last details before questions. You can only apply for 1 LI grant or fellowship per year. June 1st to May 31st. So between now and next May 31st, you can only apply for one of our grants. We can't have you apply for every single grant that you might be interested in. So choose which one you want to apply for this year and focus there. If you've received a grant or fellowship from us before, you got to turn in all that paperwork before you apply again. So if you're not sure if you finished out a previous grant, you make sure you get in touch with Carrie or send a message to grants at louisville-institute.org to find out for sure. You cannot use them for tuition or expenses toward a degree. I've already talked about that before. Generally, students who are MDiv or DMin in MDiv or DMin programs are not eligible. And if you're somebody who's gotten a grant from some other Lilly endowment organization, you can't have more than two grants totaling more than $55,000 at a time. If your institution has received a grant, that's okay. So you personally cannot hold 2 grants from Lilly or more than 2 grants that total more than $55,000 at a given time. If you have questions about that, again, send us a message. All right. Carrie, what questions do we have that we haven't answered?
I've been going through and answering most of them. There's a couple ones that are really interesting.
Uh-huh.
David asked, I haven't done serious research for a while. How professional does the research have to be?
Very good question. Thank you for asking that, David. For our pastoral grants, we know that pastors are not necessarily trained in research. And so two things. One is there's some information in the application guide that gives you some direction for how you might think about your research. There's some links and stuff in there that you can look at. The other thing is when you come to the PSP consultation, we work on that with you because we know you're not necessarily a seasoned researcher who's going to do stuff. Essentially, if you can craft a really good question and articulate what you want to do, and then maybe you say, I'm thinking I'm going to do these interviews and I want to do this, and this is what I want to end up with. If those details are not perfectly set out, or you might change them later, that's totally fine. For this particular grant, we're interested in the wisdom that pastoral leaders bring, whether or not they're trained to research that specifically. So talk about your idea, talk about what you want to do with that idea, and we can work out some of those tiny research details later. Put stuff in there that you think is what you want to do, and we'll go from there.
A couple of questions we also had were about kind of how the money is distributed. This idea of like a director versus does the money go to the individual? Does the money to go to an organization? Can you talk just a little bit more about that?
Sure, Carrie, and you can help me out when I stumble on this one too.
Or I can make it up too. So.
Yeah. The short answer is generally the money will go to an institution and be distributed by the institution, like your church. That's sometimes for tax reasons, that if it goes through the church, it has different tax implications for you as an individual than if it comes to you as an individual. So that's the primary way in which this happens. And the checks are usually issued at the beginning of the grant cycle. So next January, basically, the grant checks would be written. If you have more specific questions about like how that money gets distributed from the church or whatever, that we can have a different conversation. That might be a more detailed question to answer. What do you think, Carrie? Is there something else specific
absolutely.
I should say right here?
And I'm going to put our email back in the chat for grants. And again, this is a real person that it goes to. So if there's any questions like this, I would send it at that point. And so remember also at the end, so once we get to the point, and if you are awarded one of the grants, then we can figure out all these details. So rest assured, we've got you taken care of.
Great.
Just a couple other things that are coming through. We've answered the one about, there was a question about Lilly funding in our stipulation of 55,000. That is a Lilly endowment policy. And so what that means is your church, maybe they have a thriving congregations that would obviously make this above the amount. These are separate. We are funding you as the individual who's directing this grant. Yes, the funds may also be made to your church, but we're funding you in this. So that would not count against. If you as an individual were going to have one of our grants at $20,000 and something else at $40,000 from Lilly Endowments, that would be a conflict. But we're happy to talk more about that. We had a question I'm answering right now about resubmitting declined or reapplying. You are welcome to reapply. Amy, do you want to give any comment suggestions on that?
Sure. So if you are reapplying with a previous idea, I would encourage you to go ahead and update that idea with things you might have learned or thought about since you originally applied, because we're going to assume that if you had a really pressing idea that you applied with the first time, you've been thinking about it since that last application. So make sure you update your thinking and your idea in that resubmission of an application. You're welcome to do the same topic again. That's not a problem at all. But you might think about, like, are there new books that have come out that have helped you think differently about the topic? Have you attended a conference that maybe gave you a different perspective? And include those kinds of things into your thinking about in a new application. If you turn in the exact same thing again, some people on the committee will have read it last year, because we do have people that rotate, and they're going to think, oh, this person didn't actually put much effort into the second round. So you might consider updating it a little bit, maybe giving it to a friend or a colleague to read through to see if there are things that you could strengthen it with if you apply again.
I want to be mindful of everybody's time. And so we're just a couple minutes after. I'm just going to kind of throw in two more. This is back to the research itself. How original does research have to be?
That's sort of a complicated question. I would say the pastoral study project grants, we're not talking about something that is going to be published as original research in an academic sense. So for instance, we have people who do things like writing memoirs. We have people who do reflections on their life of ministry. We have people who are doing surveys to understand the experiences of a particular part of the church or things like that. Somebody's writing on the theology of divorce. It's not quite the same scope of research as an academic setting. So I would say if the question is whether you need to sort of cite everything and make sure it's all original in that way, that's not quite the nature of this grant. It's much more fluid and more organic than that, than a strictly academic setting where you have to sort of dot all the I's and cross all the T's about your original research. I hope that made sense.
And Amy, you were you going to answer the one about the PhD?
Yep. Larry, hi, Larry. This is somebody I know. Hi, Larry. You can apply as a PhD student for something not related to your PhD work. So if you're working separately and you want to do a pastoral study project grant or some other grant related to your work that's not as a PhD student, you can do that. I would generally say that that's going to be hard because I know what a PhD student timeline looks like. So, but feel free to apply. You can send me a question if you have more questions about that too.
Does research have to include interviews, or can it just be reading books?
Research can be whatever you think is most appropriate for your project. So making sure that you articulate, this is my project, this is my idea, and this is why I'm using the method that I'm using, whether it's book research or interviews or something else. That's all we're really talking about. Just make sure it's clear to us why you're doing what you're doing.
All right. Very last question, and we're just going to wrap it up. If a grant is given to an organization or team, can they use it for proper activities for the team?
So I think what you're asking is whether or not the money can be used to support an ongoing activity of an organization or team. And the answer is it's the same as with the individual. We're not going to pay to have you do the same things that you're already doing. And it's also research. So a team normally is made up of people maybe from different institutions who are all interested in the same question, and they're going to engage together in applying for this money and then working on that together. So it's not quite the same as if it were going to support an organization internally doing their ongoing work. The bottom line is make sure it's something new and different and not part of your regular work that you do every day. Excellent. Whether it's an individual or a team.
Excellent. Thank you for hanging with us for just a couple more minutes after. I'm going to put in the chat, if you have any questions, email us, grants@louisville-institute.org. We'll be happy to answer those questions. Come to us for feedback. All that information is on the website. And if you run into any questions or problems along the way, please feel free to contact us. We will have a recording available of this. I think it'll go out automatically to you. And again, we're happy to answer any questions. So have a great day, and thank you so much.